Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning and got another risky video today. Risky topic, I guess, maybe. This is a photography channel. If you've been here before, you know everything I do for the most part is about photography. And today is not an exception. I am heading downtown to take a portrait, kind of an environmental portrait kind of thing. But I am doing that, I'm piggybacking that project on another project because in light of all the things that are going on in our world, protests and the rioting and the racism, the police brutality, I happened to notice that this guy was making some comments on Facebook that were not politically correct. He's not saying things that the majority is typically saying right now, but he was saying things that I agree with in a lot of ways. And I contacted him and said, hey, I think we need to talk. That turned into a little interview that we're going to do this morning. And I'm going to try to do my best to record it, let him share some thoughts. And like I said, we're going to take a little bit of a risk on this channel and just discuss some things that are going on because I think they are affecting everybody and they're certainly affecting the photography industry, just economically, if nothing else. So that's my goal today. I also woke up to an air conditioning unit that isn't working. I don't know if you can tell if I'm sweating, so I got to come home and deal with that. It's going to be a busy day. I'm running out the door, eating my healthy breakfast, and I hope you stick around for this because I think it's going to be good, and I'm excited to talk to him. So. All right, guys, we're downtown Spartanburg, trying to find a shady place to sit and talk. The guy over there is doing his leaf blower, so I apologize for that in advance. But I want to introduce to you Vince. Vince was, you became the worship pastor at the church that we were attending.
Yes.
About 10 years ago? Has it been that long?
Matt, no, I think we started in 2012.
Okay, so about 8 years ago.
Yes.
And then the church was bought out or taken
Yes.
over, however, merged with another church.
Absolutely.
And the entire pastoral staff of Evangel went their own ways.
Yeah.
And you started your own church from there. And I know you're rocking and rolling. But the reason I wanted to talk to you is because of some social media posts
Yes.
that you had made about race and what's going on in the world. And I really related to it, and I was watching you getting hammered by all the comments. And so I thought we got to meet and talk a little bit. So
Yeah.
if we can kind of talk over this guy with the leaf blower, give me kind of your thoughts of what's going on in this country right now with all the race stuff.
Well, I think for me, Todd, it's I think I come from a place where I was kind of talking to Megan about the whole race relations, and the way I kind of likened it to was, imagine like I think a lot of blacks in this community or in this country, I think they feel, or even during now, I think what's happening is I feel like they think they have this idea of you're either all for us or you're against us. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So, you know, the death of George Floyd was tragic.
Definitely.
Right?
Right.
And so I think there's a difference between what you want to call either police brutality or just police dumbness, if I can use that word, versus racism. And I feel like we have to be careful that we don't scream racism for everything, because it reminds me of the boy that cried wolf, you know, and it's kind of one of these things where, okay, I could understand racism if the cops were all white or something like that. I could see you saying, okay, you know, maybe this was a racist act. But I had a cop buddy of mine actually from Orlando. I was talking to him last week Saturday, and he was explaining to me that the main cop that allegedly had his knee in George Floyd's neck, that he was a senior officer and the other guys were kind of trainees, for lack of better words. And so they basically just had to follow the lead of this officer, or they could be reprimanded or put back into the system, for lack of better words. You know what I mean? Like, go back and get more training. So the way I explained it to Megan, when I started kind of making my points about it being how can I say it? You know, can we kind of pump the brakes on the race part of it? I think what happened was a lot of friends of mine and you know, my color, black people, they got mad at me. And then they thought that I wasn't supporting the cause. And so my whole argument was, why can't it be that we agree to disagree on matters, but we all believe, because I'm sure you would say this, Todd, we all believe that the death of George Floyd was bad.
Right, absolutely.
Right? But where we part ways is, I don't believe it was race related.
So when you saw that video immediately, you didn't see race?
No,
you didn't see racism.
Let me say, when I saw the video right away, I didn't, because the first thing that came to my mind is this cop is being filmed in broad daylight.
Right.
Right? So he's being filmed in broad daylight, and in his mind, my thought process, and I can't think for the cop, but in my thought process, I felt like he believes he's following the proper protocol when someone is not following the rules, or
right.
You know. And it was funny because then Megan was like, do you think that you need to make a statement, Vince? And you know, I've made I've jumped the gun into my past, Todd. I think we've all made mistakes, and I can explain that in a different video for you. But and so I said, well, honey, I want to wait to hear till more information comes out, because I said, you still have the cop cam that may show a different perspective, which we haven't really seen yet. But then something interesting came out a couple days or so later. We noticed that more cops were there. And I think they said there was an Asian cop, a Spanish cop, and a maybe light-skinned black cop.
Right.
So rather than the country, or rather than black people, rather than them maybe kind of taking a step back, we just kind of rode the wave of the racist wave, and Black Lives Matter movement was kind of thrusted into action. So I did that whole long soliloquy to kind of bring you to my point. I gave Megan this analogy because, you know, Megan, she's half black and half white. Her mom's black.
Hey, your wife, just for
Yes.
the sake of the video, your wife, Megan. Okay.
Yes, my wife, Megan.
Who's awesome.
Yes, she is very awesome. So her dad is white and her mom is black. So she grew up with her black mom. They separated many, when Megan was still a baby in New York. Well, I gave her this analogy for all, Todd, for all the black blowback that I got from some of my social media posts, that I knew that the Lord told me that I needed to kind of bring awareness that there's other thought processes. And I know I'm not in the minority of that, but I said, Todd, imagine 4 or 5 black people walking side by side. We all have different ideologies.
Right.
Maybe we are all from different walks of life. Maybe one's Haitian, one's Jamaican, you know, one's black, African American, or whatever. If we're all walking down the street and we encounter a racist person that just has vengeance in their hearts or whatever, they're not going to look at me and say, oh, that black guy right there, he looks like he has ideologies that's different from the rest, so let me not blow him away and let me shoot the other black guys.
Right.
No, they're going to blow us. No, they're going to get us all. So my point is that for people to think that I'm not black enough, or I don't understand racism, you know, I'll say something really tough, Todd, and this might be good for filming, because this could be very controversial for me to say, but I've experienced racism in the church.
Right.
You know, and or let me put it this way. I felt like there was a possibility of race being at play. Is that a better way to put it, maybe? I felt a certain way about some situations that I found myself in, because I worked for 2 predominantly white churches in my kind of, you know, history or ministry career, and there was times where I felt, you know, with the background that I'm coming from, with the knowledge that I'm coming with the history that I've had working at a mega church, did they pick the right person for that job or what have you? But the difference between, I think, the way that I think about it, Todd, and maybe the way this Black Lives Movement or just Black friends of mine on social media is, I don't throw in the towel and start crying racism, even if it was in play. I know that God called me for such a time as this, for a plan and a purpose. He has that for all our lives, no matter the color of our skin. And I said, I'm not gonna make my feelings stop me from pursuing what God has for me. And I think what happens with a lot of Black people, and this, I'm not speaking for all Black people, but I think what happens for a lot of Black people, Todd, is we get stuck in a place where we think racism is in operation, and then a lot of times we it gets out of hand. We start, whether it's protesting or rioting or doing whatever, and I feel like there's a time and a place for certain things. And so I feel like for me, and I made this statement on social media, I said, the difference between racism today, Todd, and racism when my parents were dealing with it was, back then it was almost celebrated, or there was no repercussions. Nowadays, any person that gets found out being a racist, even if they didn't mean to be, even if the whole story wasn't proven, you could attest to this, Todd. We either see them lose their jobs,
right?
That they're exposed on social media, and you hear people on social media petitioning. I'm sure you've seen many videos where if some white person spoke out about something, they find their social media page and then it goes viral.
Right.
And then you find out that they got fired from their company because the company feels the pressure, right? So I think for me, that's kind of, I feel like, to me, that's the part of it where I differ. And so I think what makes some of what I said like a hot topic or a hot take was because I wasn't, all of the ideologies of everything going on with our culture today, I don't agree with. And as a pastor of a multicultural church, I feel like I have a responsibility not only to my Black members, but my white, Spanish, and Asian members to preach the well-balanced gospel.
Sure.
These members aren't coming to Rock in the Nations to hear a Black gospel, a white gospel, a Spanish gospel. They're coming to hear the gospel.
Right.
And I'm gonna say something a little tough now, Todd. What I've and I want to come for both cultures for a moment. I feel like what happens is when you have a predominantly Black church, it's easy, and I'm only speaking statistically right now. I'm not saying all people, but I think you and I could both agree that predominantly in society, Black people are predominantly, they vote Democrat.
Right.
Predominantly, right? We can
Sure.
both agree on that.
Sure.
And white people predominantly vote Republican. And I guess it's weird to believe that the flip-flop is opposite too. There are a contingent of people that vote, whites that vote Democrat and Blacks that vote Republican.
Sure.
Well, what happens is when your ideologies don't fully line up with everything of your culture, they feel like you're a sellout or you're this or you're that. And so for me, where I find problems is it's convenient for a predominantly Black pastor to talk about and talk bad about Trump. And let me just be frank, Todd. I have Black pastors and white evangelical pastors that, if you look at their posts, Todd, like if you and I, if I walk you through my posts right now on social media and I said, okay, this is a Black pastor of a pretty large church, friend of mine, and this is a white pastor of a pretty large church of mine, you wouldn't believe there were pastors of churches when you saw their posts on social media. So you'll have this black pastor completely just bashing President Trump. And then you'll have this white pastor bashing the Democratic Party, Democrats, all these terminologies. I hope, Nancy Pelosi falls in a hole. And I'm thinking to myself, I've kind of, I don't want to say I've coined this phrase for it, but I kind of gave I said that there's a lot of people walking this earth that are false gatekeepers for the kingdom of God. And here's what I mean by that, Todd. You got people, I don't want to be too harsh with this, but I think you'll understand my analogy. You got people that are walking in this modern day world that you could consider the today's modern day version of Saul.
Okay.
So Saul, we both know, killed Christians, and in his heart of hearts, in his inner convictions, he thought he was doing the good. He thought he was fighting good faith. But then when he got knocked off of his beast, some translation called it, God revealed to him, Saul, Saul, why are you doing this? For lack of better words, conviction, the beam of heaven, whatever you want to call it, came upon him. And then instantly, Todd, he turned his life around. Literally, he's going down this road one day in 1 second, and then the following second, he is completely changing him, turning his life around, making a 180. And I feel like there's believers today, and I know this will sound taboo to say, but the Bible has precedence for this, Tom. The Bible says many will say in those last days, I did this in your name and I did that in your name. And he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you.
Right. I actually was talking to my wife earlier about how the verse that says that in the last days, even the elect will be fooled or deceived, if that were possible. And I've always thought, how is that possible? But I'm watching a lot of church folks, with the virus thing as well as the race thing, that I can't wrap my mind around the way they're thinking.
Yes, sir.
Now, that kind of leads me to this, because I've seen a lot of posts, church folks as well,
sure,
who are very much supporting systemic racism.
Oh, man.
It's like it's all over the place, as well as the white privilege and how white people need to feel guilty for our privilege.
Yes.
Do you feel that there's truth to that? And do you even think, as a white person, does it make any difference if I feel guilty about it and apologize to everybody? Is that helping the situation?
No, and I've seen a couple different posts on this, Todd, and before I answer the question, let me kind of preface my comment by saying this. I am very unique. I'm very unusual. Even from when I was younger in ministry, I always got in trouble for speaking out when everyone else was kind of going with the crowd. I was like, hello, something's wrong here, So with that being said, my comments, my answers are going to be kind of frank and matter of fact, or not a matter of fact, but just thought. Okay, first let me answer this one. I don't believe in systemic racism in today's society.
Okay.
And I know that goes against the grain. Well, let me do this. Let me answer both of them real quick, and then I'll try to break both down. I don't believe in systemic racism, and I don't believe that, let's take you for example, Todd. So you're white, right?
Right.
And so then you would be attached with the term white privilege, right?
Correct.
But the only problem I have with that is this. Do I believe that if an employer was racist, they would hire you over me? Okay, sure. But these incidents are so kind of isolated in today's society. There's so many things that we've been brought aware to in today's society. Now we're finding there's so much more unity and so much more interracial relationships and stuff. So let me put it this way. Let me first address the systemic racism. I had a post on social media, which maybe you saw this one, where I was telling a group of friends that were kind of talking about being appalled to the whole George Floyd And then you even have some black people saying they're killing us out here. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, white cops are killing us out here. There's almost, okay, so let's just say there was like 11 or so black people that died within a few years period, right? What if you and I found out that 400,000 black people were pulled over in America in 3 years, and 11 people result in white cop dying? And what if we found out that in that same statistic, Todd, and there's statistics for this, that 30 whites got killed from white cops? So there's so many different things. And then the other point that people were making was, when I made this comment that apparently a group of my black friends were in an uproar, I said, we're saying Black Lives Matter for George Floyd, for Arbery, I can't remember his last name right now.
Right.
And some of these people that we've seen become national news over the years.
Right.
Okay, so then when I said, why aren't we just as outraged if Black lives really matter, Todd? See, this is the thing that makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to a lot of the Black Lives Matter people. To me, it makes sense that if Black lives matter, we should be just as upset or just as appalled when blacks are killing blacks in inner cities like Chicago.
Sure.
Well, when I made that point, here came the cuss word, systemic racism.
Right.
And they said, that's happening because of systemic racism. And when these intelligent friends of mine made that statement, I was so upset that we would use as an excuse for blacks killing blacks. And there's even cartoon caricatures and graphs trying to bring evidence for systemic racism. And so for me, the reason why I don't believe it exists today is because any black person in a poor black community has the ingredient within them to come out of that circumstance. But if they decide to stay in that, in gang-related areas, in poverty-related areas, if they choose not to try to go after a good job, then they're saying to themselves, I'm comfortable in this situation that I'm in, and so I don't want to change. That's not systemic racism to me. That is a person's own decision to stay within a impoverished type situation. And so I hope I kind of answered the systemic racism side of it, of how I don't really believe in it. And then in this day and age with charter schools and what are some other ideas I can give you? You got charter schools. You have I gave my wife Megan this analogy. Let's take said black person in a poor black neighborhood, goes and works hard at a McDonald's, and if his attitude is right, if his whole idea is to do better for himself or herself, he shows respect to his superiors, then he elevates in McDonald's, becomes a shift manager, then becomes a assistant manager, then becomes a store manager. Now he has an opportunity to own a McDonald's franchise. This type of opportunity in America is available to all people.
Absolutely.
Todd, would you agree?
Absolutely. And I would say I totally agree. It's not as easy for everybody. Some people are going to have to work harder and overcome greater obstacles.
Sure.
And there's reasons for that, not just systemic racism. I don't believe that.
Right.
I mean, absentee fathers are a big deal.
Yes.
If you're being raised by a grandma who works 3 jobs to pay for things, that's an obstacle that kid's going to have to overcome compared to the kid that's growing up in the suburbs with two parents that make $250,000 a year.
That's right, sir.
So I would say that the opportunity is equal to everybody.
Yeah.
But the challenges are going to be different for different people.
I mean, I think there's a difference, Todd, between saying that there's systemic racism versus I could be profiled. Does that make sense?
Right.
And to me, the way I define profiling or racially profiling is that in my lifetime, I'm going to be profiled, but not everyone's profiling me. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So if I find the right situation that's willing to help me, like would you believe, Todd, just through some of my social media interactions and just through some of my networking with pastors and leaders, I'm finding that there's precedence for this even in Greenville, if you allow me to say. Apostle Ron Carpenter, a pastor of a mega church that pretty much grew his church from the ground up in Greenville, South Carolina, turned his church over to a predominantly black pastor. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of situations where we're seeing a white bishop or a white pastor that saw something in maybe one of his proteges, and that protege happens to be black. And then that person, I'll give you a personal example. The church that we purchased, Todd, here in the city, it was owned by white Russian pastors or elder board. They gave us an opportunity. I don't know if you know our story, but in 2015, the end of 2015, we had been pastoring for about 3 months, and we know that we wanted to get out of the hotel here,
right?
And opportunity came up where the church that we were in was for sale. Well, I'll give you rapid fire real quick. So we knew we couldn't buy a building because we didn't have any credit. We didn't have any, long years of pastoral ministry. Well, this church took a chance on us, even though they wanted to sell it. They gave us an interest-free loan for 2 years that they took on themselves. So we were paying them. And then after that 2 years, we were able to get a loan from a bank. Well, I'm a young or new, for the first time, young black pastor of a church. Now, I didn't use excuses towards the faith that God gave me that says that, if my father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, I don't call myself the oppressed one. Right. I am not oppressed. I am blessed and highly favored. And so are you. We're both blessed and highly favored. And so if systemic racism was a thing that all black people or black people as a whole find themselves in, how did I get this opportunity from a white person?
Right.
So that's my view of systemic racism. And then white privilege, I can see how it could be a thing from the standpoint of maybe if an elderly white woman is walking down the street at nighttime and a young white person is walking down, she may not feel threatened or something, but maybe if a black person with a hoodie, and so maybe in the way we profile each other, in the fact that a black person seems more dangerous than a white person, whereas we've seen situations where that same white innocent looking kid could try to mug that older woman, right, and then the black guy is the one that goes after her aid. But in that older white woman's mind, she's thinking the black guy is a threat. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I guess my knee-jerk reaction is, why does she have that sense?
Yeah. Sure.
I try to, let's say that white middle-aged men started bombing abortion clinics.
Yes.
Every single month.
Yes.
Every single month on the news, there was some white middle-aged guy that was attacking an abortion clinic or killing an abortion doctor. And if I went on vacation to some city I didn't know, and I'm walking down the streets, and I don't realize that I'm in front of a Planned Parenthood, but I'm taking pictures of the architecture,
yeah,
and Planned Parenthood calls the cops on me because, hey, there's a white middle-aged white guy standing around loitering in front of our building, they just profiled me.
That's true.
My knee-jerk reaction is not to be mad at the Planned Parenthood, but to be mad at the white middle-aged guys that have been bombing that, because you just made it look bad for me.
That's exactly right.
So that profiling or that white privilege thing that's out there, to me, it's like, White middle-aged men have made a bad name for the rest of us. And
Yes.
that's where my anger goes.
Yes, sir.
Why does the young black guy with the hoodie at midnight spark fear? Well, probably because a lot of that age group demographic
exactly
have
right.
committed a lot of crimes, and now we're
exactly
scared
right.
of them.
That's right.
It's not that we hate black people, we're just scared, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I think there's blame on both sides.
Yeah. And I think too, for me, I watch a lot of like sports, right? I'm a sports fanatic.
You're in withdrawals.
Yes, right now I am, big time. But it's been good for my family, but that's for another video. Well, one of the things that you hear them talk about a lot, and I'm sure there's some truth to this, is in a lot of the major sports like baseball, football, and basketball, there's not a lot of, there's maybe one or two African-American GMs or
Right.
African-American coaches, for
Right. example.
So there's something in football that they came up with called the Rooney Rule. And basically what that is the Pittsburgh Steelers were the first team, I think, to kind of let the coach that's actually still coaching Steelers. In fact, he's been coaching the Pittsburgh team for maybe at least 12, 13 years. I mean, real long tenure.
Mike Tomlin, right?
Mike Tomlin, yeah.
Right.
And now there's this thing called the Rooney Rule, where before you hire any coaches, you have to interview a black coach.
Okay.
But people were saying that is still broken because they're hiring young white coaches that don't have any major coaching experience, whether it be offensive coach or defensive coach. There's a guy that got hired from the New York Giants, my team, by the way, coming from New York, from New England, and he was a special teams guy. And the way the outrage happened in the black community, Todd, was that here's this young guy that didn't even come up the ranks, but they gave him this position. And there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it like, okay, yeah, that could be white privilege, or you can also look at it as these GMs and these professional teams are drooling over anyone they can get from the New England organization.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep,
So in
absolutely.
other words, they would take the water boy if they thought the water boy had the DNA of
Right.
Bill Belichick. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, and speaking of privilege, how many athletes, kids, get special?
See,
They're getting. If Michael Jordan's, I don't even know if he has a son, but if his son
Yes.
grew up, played basketball, I'm thinking coaches and scouts and stuff are watching him play high school basketball just because he's Michael Jordan's son, with
Yes.
the thought, okay, he may be just as good as his dad was.
Yes.
And so there's a privilege there.
Mm-hmm.
And
There is.
I don't have a problem with that privilege. Just like you're saying, you came out of the New England Bill Belichick era, you probably know some things that we
Absolutely.
want. So we're going to look at you first.
That's right.
I think that happens in all society.
Yeah, it does.
How many, speaking of pastors of churches, Joel Osteen got his dad's church, right? He didn't even want to be a pastor.
That's right.
So,
That's absolutely right.
okay, so last question.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. If this problem was completely gone, racism, white privilege, all of it was just solved, what would America look like? How would our society be if this was a non-issue?
I think if this was a non-issue, can I give you two types? Let me give you the worldly thing that I envision in my mind. I can see a scenario where there would be a lot more wealthy billionaire black people,
Okay.
because they're either able to work for Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft or Apple, be up in those hierarchies, and so I think there will be more I think the wealth maybe distribution would look different.
Okay.
Because I think you and I could agree there probably are people that are racist in certain walks of life.
Okay.
Not you and I, not most people, and you know, but I think there would be a more diverse economic status that we would start seeing. And I feel like we're seeing it slowly, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And from a spiritual standpoint, we'd be in revival.
Okay.
Because we would be united, I believe, as a people, and we would be a part of what the end time scriptures and revelations and some parts of the Gospels talks about, a certain unity that we would be encountering, that would breed a revival. We would see more people coming to the faith during those times, because we are a more unified body. And I think the absence of racism, I think personally, brings people to really think for themselves, rather than a black person feeling like, well, I'm going to be isolated if I'm a Democrat, or if I'm not, if I'm a Republican, or if I'm not anything like what my community wants me to be. Those ideologies would not be in effect, because, you know, to your question, racism is wiped out.
Right.
It's in no one's brain. You know, we just all look like really cool crayon colors. Right?
Right.
So I think that would be my easy answer of how I see it from like a professional standpoint and then a spiritual standpoint. I really believe the church would be unified. You wouldn't see all black churches anymore or all white churches anymore, because preachers if you have a black church leader, he's not preaching to a stereotype. And then if you have a white evangelical pastor, he's not preaching to a stereotype. He's preaching to a community, knowing that all cultures are going to his church.
Right. Awesome. All right, Vince. Well, that's awesome. It was great talking to you, bud.
Good talking to you too.
All right, let's go take a portrait.
Yes.
All right.
I'm ready.
Vince, as always, my friend, it's great talking to you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and all the best to you.
Same to you, buddy. Sounds good.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, buddy.
What a great conversation with Vince that was. I truly enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy it, get something out of it. I tell you, if I videotaped everything we talked about and all the things he said, the video would have been 3 times as long. But I think I gave you the meat of what he was talking about and his perspective on this whole racism thing and what's going on in America. So, as always, I certainly invite you to comment, thumbs up, thumbs down. Tell me your thoughts about it. I'm sure Vince would appreciate hearing what you have to say as well. Hope you enjoyed it. I will show you the portrait that I did of him right here, because this is a photography channel after all. And I will see you guys in the very next video. Appreciate you all and look forward to seeing your comments, and see you in the next video.